Hello, everybody. My name is Raksha Naidoo. I'm the current chairperson of Women in Mining South Africa. My first disclaimer is that I'm probably going to have a coughing fit or two, so please forgive me if I suddenly go off mic and cough like a crazy person. Thanks so much for making time to join us tonight as part of our first kickoff, or actually second kickoff to Women's Month. Last week we were hosted and sponsored by Partners in Performance for our first Thursday event, which was really wonderful, and it was great to get out there and connect with people for the first time at First Thursday, which was really nice. And tonight we're going to have a panel discussion featuring some of our WiMSA patrons who are industry icons, mentors to many, many people in the industry, and I'm sure all of you know. So I don't probably need to go through very detailed introductions, but all the same, I would love for you guys to meet our panelists tonight. We've got Claire Mcmaster here from Fraser Alexander, Fatima Collins from Sibanye Stillwater, Lindi Nakedi from Gubani, and Thutula Balfour from the Minerals Council. I'm sure each one of them will give us a brief introduction right now. They've all served as patrons on WiMSA for a very, very long time. Lindi and Claire both being former chairs of WiMSA as well, and they continue to be massive advocates of women in mining and everything women empowerment. So it is an absolute pleasure and honor to have them with us tonight. So thank you so much, ladies. Really, really appreciate it. Maybe we can kick off, Claire, if we could, with you. A brief intro for those who don't know you, and maybe just start by telling us a little bit about how did you get into the mining industry?
So thanks, Raksha, and good evening, everybody. So lovely to be here. And I was reflecting when you said earlier you want us to introduce ourselves, and I was like, sure. I think I was the chair of Women in Mining South Africa over 10 years ago now, which is, feels like a lifetime ago. We're still, late 30s, early 40s. I had a little bit more of a spring in my step. But so just what is my day job? I'm the HR executive for Fraser Alexander. As I said, I'm the past chair of Women in Mining South Africa. I currently serve on the Women Leadership Forum for the Minerals Council, and I am on the board, the advisory board for the Minerals Council Gender-Based Violence Initiative. So that's pretty much the couple of the roles that I have. How did I get into mining? Well, actually, my background's in human resources, and I grew up in Cape Town. I studied in the Eastern Cape, and to be honest, when I answered an advert to run a specialist placement agency that was focused on the mining industry, I can tell you with a lot of confidence, I hadn't given mining a lot of thought at all. Really, I'd worked in IT, I'd worked in construction, but never mining. But I was on honeymoon, and and I was young, I was 24. And it was towards the end of my honeymoon, and in those days you paged through the newspaper. So I was paging through the newspaper, and I saw an advert to run a specialist placement agency, went to the interview, and lucky for me, I don't know if anybody's ever been interviewed by Mike Scott, but Mike doesn't actually ask questions in an interview. He tells you about the job and asks you if you'd like the job. And lucky for me, that's exactly what he did. And I said, thank you very much, and started work a few weeks later. And I really, honestly, haven't looked back, and just discovered this rich and exciting and challenging industry that has so much to give, and have enjoyed it now. That was almost 25 years ago.
So you pretty much fell into it by accident, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
Complete chance. So falling into it is one thing. Why did you stay?
So I think, as I said, every day is a different day. And I was lucky. I worked for amazing organizations. I worked for companies where I was allowed to be a part of designing the strategic direction at quite a young age too. And to be honest, it never really got to a place where I sat down and it's funny for an HR person to make a decision about, was I doing the right thing for my career? I was actually just so busy dealing with the business of the day, and the very exciting work that I was able to do, and every year there were new challenges. So and I think so that kept me busy. And then having got involved in WiMSA, could see that there was work to do. I'm very passionate about mining, and I believe that it gives so much to the people who work in mining, and particularly like if you're a scientist and you can choose to work in academia or you can choose to work in mining, but you are able to have a career that is interesting, technically challenging, but also quite financially rewarding. So I think it ticks a lot of boxes, and I do believe that mining has a very important role to play in the future, you know, as we deploy new technology, as we continue to mine critical metals. I think it's more and more exciting, and I love also at the moment, I'm thoroughly enjoying the ESG journey and being able to, you know, almost give back to industry in terms of the areas of ESG, and particularly the work that I've been able to do in communities. You know, I find it incredibly rewarding. So lots of reasons to stay around.
Lots of reasons, definitely. Okay, so we'll definitely come back to some of your reasons, Claire. Dr. Balfour, what about yourself? You're also a massive advocate in the industry. You're doing so much in terms of being the change. Tell us, how did you get into it, and why did you stay?
Okay. Can you see me?
Yep.
And I would like, thanks very much, Chair, and good evening to everyone on the platform. Thanks for the invitation to participate. I am a medical doctor, trained as a specialist in public health medicine, and I joined the industry 15 years ago.
Sorry. I think we've got some background noise, guys. Can you also hear it, or is it me?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I muted some of the participants now, so it should be better.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry, Thutula, carry on. You're on
Sorry,
mute.
Dr. Balfour. Sorry, Dr.
You're on
Balfour.
mute.
I muted everyone, so please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're still on mute, Thutula, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes. No, we've lost you again. Sorry. Oh, guys, we're still in the Zoom age.
Let me use another device. Yeah. Let me read.
Okay, we'll come back to you while you sort this out. Fatima, maybe you can tell us about it. You're part of your entire portfolio with Sibanye is WIM. So tell us, how did you get into mining?
Thanks, Raksha. Good evening, everyone. So currently, I'm the project manager at Sibanye, and I manage the Women in Mining portfolio. I've got an extensive background that didn't actually start in mining. I started off as a microbiologist, worked in South Africa and in the UK. Then I moved and I lived in Toronto and worked in the NGO sector, and came back, worked in the medical sector for a while, then worked in corporate banking in Bombay, came back to South Africa. And that's when I made a concerted change about, 13, 14 years ago. And I joined the socioeconomic development sector. And that's how I fell into mining, because mining is a huge part of the socioeconomics of our country, being the biggest employers of youth in South Africa, and having a history of really supporting communities in South Africa. The mining industry is intricately linked to socioeconomic development. As a consultant, socioeconomic development consultant, I worked with various mining companies over the last 13 years, whether it was through their social and labor plans, their corporate social responsibility, their investments in communities. And through that journey, finally joined a mining company myself. But why I find it so interesting is that in a country like South Africa, where so much is dependent on corporates and on communities and the social network and the social capital that we build, very, very different from first world countries where the government looks after everybody and interpersonal relationships are thwarted like that. So in South Africa, Ubuntu, you are because we are because you are. And that very spirit of Ubuntu and the way corporates in South Africa, especially the mining companies, how they give back to the communities, got me involved. So whether it was working with community development trusts, whether it was working with corporate social investments in community, social and labor plans, I found myself advising, evaluating, developing strategies on how communities can benefit how companies can actually contribute in the communities in which they operate. And then as an extension of that, I joined Sibanya as the woman in mining lead for the company. I particularly enjoy the mining industry because it's such a big contributor to the economy of the country, to the lives of the people. Whether we're looking at infrastructure in communities, mining companies are responsible for dropping boreholes in communities. They're responsible for schools, upgrading hospitals, bursaries, internships. And I find that the interdependence of communities and corporates is well displayed in the mining sector. So yeah, that's what keeps me here, because you see your contribution every day.
Yeah, and that must be incredibly rewarding from that perspective, especially as you WIM lead at Sibanya as well. So it allows you to firsthand engage with a lot of these things on a day-to-day basis, right?
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just making sure that your employees are comfortable. It intersects with justice, it intersects with policy, it intersects with infrastructure and technology, it intersects with gender-based violence. So it gives you a broad scope. And because my focus is completely women in mining, it gives me an oversight across the organization, where I find if I was probably, say, just responsible for gender-based violence or just responsible for policy and procedure, it might have been a bit limiting. But because this portfolio allows me to work across the organization, it's a very nice way of bringing things together, identifying loopholes and interconnecting people so that your end result is beneficial for your female employees.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll come back to touch on that as well in a little bit. Lindi, also as a past chair, tell us about your journey.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully my connection will keep up because I've been on and off. But basically, I'm quite excited to be here because I think most of my journey was catapulted, into a different level of my participation in the mining industry when I began to connect with other women. And so WiMSA is always very close to my heart. Can you hear me? Or
Yes,
is my network
we can.
bad?
Yep, you're
Okay,
good.
All right. So I think mining found me because it came through my husband. And I think I remember the one that it was almost like a very sweet date. I was in Secunda with him, we were engaged, and he was like, let me take you to the plant, in the evening. And we went there, sat in the back of the bakkie and just looked at that Sasol Secunda plant. And it was just amazing, the lights and just how quiet it was. And, it was quiet, but with the sound of, obviously the shafts and everything, but it was just a lovely place to be in. And I remember, just falling in love, with just this huge, operation. And that's why I was like, okay, I'm drawn to this. But then the interesting thing was that I was still in recruitment. My background is, human resources as well. And I was running a recruitment company, but I was then drawn into this world when my husband was like, look, there's this thing called exploration drilling, and our dreams are so big, we need to be making our own money. So I've always been an entrepreneur, and the mining space therefore called me because of just how huge the operation was, and it was something I just could not wrap my head around, but also the fact that it can create so many opportunities for so many people, along this whole mining value chain. And so I'm still here because of the fact that I believe that there's still so much opportunities, especially with the minerals of the future, how we can still empower our world, how we can still make a difference in our communities through the operations of mining. But I'm mostly very much passionate about women because growing up, I had very influential women in my life. And I feel when we see something modeled, we are able to therefore therefore learn from that and take it almost to the next level. So I still believe in the power of women and what we can create, because when we create, we don't just create for ourselves. You know, even when we have our businesses, they're not just for us. They're for the benefit of everybody, you know, from your employees to the community to the families of your employees, you know. So I think that the potential that we hold as women needs to be harnessed even more. And if we as women are in those leadership positions, to give other people an opportunity to do the same, the sky is the limit. In fact, our country can see a very different future. So yeah, that's where my passion is, empowering our others so that we can be able to make a better impact in our world.
I can absolutely see how you guys are past chairs, hey? Like massive shoes for us all to fill. Okay, we'll circle back to that one, Lindi, as well.
Yeah, well said.
Thutula, are we gonna try? We should be good.
Okay. No,
There we go.
I can hear me very well now. It's
We are
actually
good.
vanity that made me use the other computer, because I always feel this camera is not great. But then I guess everything else is good, even the sound is better. I thought there was, you know, this big sound, you know, from the background, when actually it was the computer which was the problem.
It's all good. We can hear you perfectly.
So I was saying, I joined 15 years ago and in fact, mining found me, and it was on the third time mining was reaching out to me that I joined. The first time I was actually recruited by a company, or it was like an informal discussion, but I had just joined an organization where I had, you know, looked for that job. In another meeting we had, you know, I said that all my jobs, I have been headhunted, except this one job, which ended up being my worst job. And so it's so ironic that mining, someone tried to recruit me then, but because of my loyalty and the fact that I had looked for this job and I had just started, I felt I can't even look at mining. And again, I was approached and I can't remember what the reason was. So I was essentially headhunted to come into mining. And as I have said before, anyone who's headhunted, the person who's headhunting you has probably looked at the job, looked at you, and they saw a great fit. So you should always be, you know, very receptive to such. And when I came into mining, I've got, as I said, you know, my specialty in public health medicine. And the time I joined, our TB rates were very high. So I found it very exciting. It was an area I could apply myself because, you know, public health is about controlling disease. And so one made, you know, there was a lot of activity, and we made really great strides, you know, to reduce TB, you know, in the industry. And what has kept me is probably the variety of things. I mean, as a doctor who is employed in mining, our key, you know, reason to be employed is occupational health. So I had done a diploma in occupational health, but just as, you know, just ticking off a box. And then I found that I could actually apply it, you know, in mining. So the variety of things, occupational diseases, public health, COVID came, for instance, and, you know, the response by the industry was phenomenal. We really made a mark, you know, in terms of galvanizing even the communities around us, working with business. And I also am the lead for women in mining at the Minerals Council. We've got a fairly young, you know, program. We started about 3 years ago. And so, you know, it's still also quite exciting in terms of new things coming up that we're doing. We've got a dashboard where we're trying to see how we can ultimately be able to measure our impact and progress, you know, as an industry. And in fact, today we launched a newsletter for the first time. So anyone who hasn't seen our newsletter, please go on our LinkedIn page. I'm sure all our other, you know, social media pages, you know, you can also look. We've just launched that. So I have found that the companies which manage to keep employees, because before then I would work 4 years, 5 years, and I thought 6 years was the maximum I can work anywhere. Beyond that, I am toxic, because when I was at the DOH and I was 6 years there, I was seriously toxic. But I guess it was more the environment. What I've noticed in mining is that, you know, there are a lot of people that stay for years. And the reason they stay is because the employer keeps shifting, you know, your responsibilities. No one can do the same thing for 15 years. It's not possible. But what happens is maybe after 3, 4 years, you are given another responsibility. At one stage, I was doing the mining lekgotla, which was a new, you know, platform for engagement in the industry. And the WiMSA, for instance, in the past 3 years, that's something new. So if you keep just shifting something so that a person feels, you know, there's a new challenge, something else to do, it really makes you stay. So I'm here for keeps in mining. And of course, I mean, it is the bedrock of the economy of this country, and there's still so much potential. There's major challenges, yes, but there's also still a lot of potential in the industry. And I hope as an industry, you know, overall, women in the industry, but even the whole of the industry, that we can be part of the solution for our country, because there's a lot we need to do to assist, you know, in taking South Africa forward.
Thank you so much for that. I think the passion that each and every one of you have just displayed, just by introducing yourselves as well, is reason and best testimony to why you guys are all patrons and advocates of this in this industry. And I think also one of the reasons why we wanted to have the 4 of you particularly was each of you also comes from a very different background in terms of how you found yourself from a professional perspective, as well as how you've sort of navigated your career. So I would encourage as well the rest of our listeners or who are online tonight listening, guys, please use the chat box to ask questions, because we also want this to be very interactive. And I think that there's probably going to be a lot that our ladies are going to talk about that will resonate with a lot of you. So if there are specific things that you would like us to chat about or to discuss, please also drop your questions or raise a hand and, you know, join us in the conversation, because we also want to hear from people. And I think that that's going to be very important for us tonight. So please don't be shy. Let's do that. The other thing I think that becomes nice to see is, given that each of you are from different backgrounds as well, it shows the different faces that women can have in mining. And I think that's something which is also very interesting, in that a lot of people sometimes have the stigma, you could only be a geologist or a mining engineer or this or that. And I think over the years, we've seen people's careers develop to such a point that women can wear so many different hats as part of being in the mining industry. And one of the things that WiMSA created last year, and we've done a lot of work with Fraser Alexander on this particularly, is a career booklet, which is something that we're using as well in terms of going out to attract more people into the industry as well, and to also get young girls excited about STEM and the advocacy of this industry that we're in. So Claire, if I can ask you, because I mean, we've obviously done a lot of work on this, and I know it's something you advocate a lot for as well. Can you maybe tell us, what was it about that and the work that you do in a lot of the communities and the development that spurs you on and drives the passion?
So yeah, Raksha, I mean, I think that's been definitely a passion project for a number of years now, and Lindi and Nolene and myself, that, you know, over the years we've worked on it. And actually, before we had a career booklet, we actually had a couple of career fairs that we ran originally with Cyberno. We had about 200 young women who would come to the career fair. And the reason that we put that in place is that we know that the industry that we all love, the mining industry, is often not perceived to be a sexy industry. It's not. When young women leave school, or they certainly leave university, they might be thinking, can I get a job in a bank, or you know, what other industries could I go and work in? And they don't automatically want to work in mining. So we wanted to get people quite excited. Obviously, the more individuals that come into mining, the better our talent pool, the more chance we have of women remaining in the industry. Because, you know, I would go and address a lot of graduate classes, so geology classes, mining engineering departments at FITS and TICS, a lot of the environmental scientists. And I would talk to classes that were 50% women. And then you would see a few years later, those women weren't in the industry, and we still had a challenge of where we'd gone from 9%, I think, in about 2009, to starting to stagnate in terms of the representation that we saw in our industry. So we've been 14% for a jolly long time now, you know, of women in the industry. So for us, it was definitely a passion project that we wanted to encourage more women to enter our industry and then remain in the industry. So the latest career fair that we held, we actually went to Bafokeng High, and I think we had about 350 young women, and a number of mining houses came along to talk about, Sibanye was one of them, to talk about a career in their organization. And the one thing I can tell you is that what we could see there is that over the years, the excitement and the perception of mining is definitely starting to change. So yeah, the passion project definitely to change the perception of what a career in this industry looks like and what it can deliver to young people. Because as I said earlier, I truly believe we can change the sort of economic dynamic of people's lives by bringing more women into mining.
So I think, so as we bring more women into mining as well, there's a lot that we need to do and a lot of things that we need to put in place in order to, one, I guess, you know, promote them, excite them, develop them, and then retain them ultimately. Thutula, from your experiences and the work you guys do at Minerals Council, what are some of those key drivers that we as mining professionals need to start putting into place in our companies and organizations in order to do that?
You know, there's a lot of things, and companies need to have a systematic approach. So starting with your culture, you can't keep women if your culture is not welcoming of women. And so if you're going to bring in, you know, new people who are diversity, you know, whether it's women or LGBTQI, you do need to make sure that the people that are there, they, in a way, you change the culture, you educate them about, you know, what it is that needs to change. So you can't have sexist jokes, for instance, and sexism going on. So the culture is important, and it must be from the top. And the next one is, you know, it's like Maslow's, you know, hierarchy of needs. Physical things, you know, the basic things like the physical environment, PPE, those make people feel they are being, you know, catered for, or they are not. So the company that, for instance, will have, you know, change rooms and ablution facilities, even up to creches, because you know that a lot of women have children and they do not have, you know, all of them, they don't have people who can look after the children. Then you are more likely to keep women if you provide all of those. PPE, if people are comfortable in what they are wearing. And of course, then you can start moving up to, you know, the progression that women see. They know that it's not about just numbers, and there's really no plan for them to be going up in the organization. When they see that, you know, they are being promoted, we are quite, when we look at our dashboard as a Minerals Council, we are quite pleased that things like, for instance, bursaries, there's far more, the proportion of women is far higher, you know, than men who receive those. And again, when it comes to, you know, absorption, find that people still, you know, make sure that they do absorb. So it's a series of things. And as I say, it needs to be systematic, starting with the basics, culture, the physical environment, right up to making sure that women aspire to stay and aspire to be moving up, you know, in that organization.
So, you know, when you talk about the basics like ablution facilities and PPE, it's almost, I don't know, it almost seems crazy that we're still talking about something as simplistic and basic as that. But it's such a real problem that continues to exist in so many different operations, right? Fatima, maybe seeing as you are from an organization, what does somebody like Sibanye do in order to fix that?
Thanks, Raksha. So, you know, there are guidelines from the Mine Health and Safety Council, etc. So on the one hand, it's a regulatory responsibility that we have to ensure that we upgrade our change houses and we get audited, and to make sure that, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond just your license to operate or your regulatory obligations. What we do is we have surveys, we speak to the women on the ground. We understand that gender-based violence and abuse is a huge thing. So we ensure that, for example, we have lights in all of our cages going down. Should everybody switch their headlamps off? Women are quite vulnerable in the dark, so we ensure that we roll out lights in the cages. We look at isolated areas and see how we can ensure that women either don't work there alone, or we have connectivity, or we have some form of communication with women in isolated areas. The PPE, like Dr. Thutula said, is ongoing. And that needs to be addressed, therefore, on an ongoing basis. What we also find is toilets. You know, you need to make, we need to make sure that women are safe, that women have toilets that are clean. Infections are a risk for women, that the requirements of women are very different from the requirements of men. We're finding that lactation facilities are becoming more important. But to touch on what Dr. Balfour said about culture, we so often talk to women about, you know, you need to change your mindset. You can do this. You need to focus on what you want. You can achieve your goals. You need to be confident. You need to have mentors, etc. But that's all in vain if we don't do the same sort of culture training with men, because your mindset can get you so far, but in an environment where that's dominated by men, if that mindset doesn't change, it can be a very, very frustrating place for a woman to be. So we encourage the training with men as well on what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, how the culture is changing in the organization. And it's a long process, but it needs to be jointly men and women that need to have this culture shift. And it's really difficult. What we also see, Raksha, is that our women on the mines have legacy issues from the hostel sort of women go away to work, and women have to look after households. Those legacy issues continue. So the pressure on a woman that comes to work, by the time she gets to the mine, she's done her first half of her first job already, and then she comes to work, which is then her second job. And it's about taking those things into consideration, so that that women are appropriately accommodated for in the workplace.
And I think, you know, it is a multi-layer approach that you have to adopt with every single stakeholder in the value chain in order to start bringing about that difference, right? And I think to probably follow on what you're saying, Fatima, and I think there's a question in the chat from Shanae about what advice can you guys provide in terms of how do people go about driving change in culture from a woman in mining perspective? Dr. Balfour, maybe we can start with you on that. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing and some of the learnings that you've got from the interactions at Minerals Council in terms of what are the culture drivers that people can take back into their organizations?
Well, as I said, you know, for us, what we find across the board, because, you know, there's a lot of similarities between culture for women in mining and culture for safety and health, for instance. So things like leadership, it's very crucial. If the leader is not, you know, on board, then you are not going to make a lot of progress. So what we find is that the companies where the leadership is it's on board, it is driving the agenda, then it is far easier, because, you know, then everything cascades from that. So that's the chief learning I would say we have, you know, from our industry.
Okay, we've got quite a few questions. So I'm going to just go to that. Lindi, I'm going to come back to you because I had something specific to ask you. I think the first one we have was from Maria, who asked about what do we think being a woman in mining will look like in the next decade? And that's such a big question as well, I think, right? And part of a lot of these changes we're all describing feeds into that. Claire, do you want to maybe start with that one?
So Raksha, I had my hand up because I wanted to add to what Thutula was sharing.
Sure, go for it.
The culture change, and
Yep.
100% leadership is so critical. But we have a model that was developed over years and years of doing a huge amount of reading around driving cultural change, particularly in ensuring gender diversity in an organization. And that model has been put into the example policy that the Minerals Council working team put together, right? And one of the areas, and we've mentioned most of them, they're things like having the right kind of leadership, having the right infrastructure. But one of the areas that we haven't spoken about is actually making sure that we have certain metrics in an organization. In other words, so what gets measured gets done, right? And so when we look at things like the gender income differential, then we make sure that if our gender income differential is 1, it means that our remuneration policies and procedures are 100% right and accurate. So I just wanted to say that that model is available for anybody to look at, and it's quite a good, let's tick the box and make sure that all the areas of culture, leadership, metrics, infrastructure, training and development, coaching, mentoring, that they're all in place to drive a culture change in an organization. And I think it's quite helpful to know. And I'm also happy to share it if anybody wants to reach out and talk people through it. Very happy. It's been effective.
Thanks, Claire. Before you jump to the question, while we're on that, so what happens if we're in a situation, and this is probably easier said than done as well, where you've got, I guess, a couple layers down of people who wanting to drive the change sort of at a mid-management level, but you don't necessarily have full buy-in from leadership. What then advice do you have for people that are trying to make this difference?
Yeah, so I think it's manage up, right?
Right.
And there's a level of advocacy, and there are very constructive ways in which you can go about pointing out the link to strong ESG, management. We know that organizations that are focused on the power of diversity are more sustainable. So there's some very strong business arguments that individuals can make. And there's a wealth of data that didn't exist 10 years ago, but it exists now to show that there's a strong relationship between the how diverse your workforce is and how successful you are financially. So it's that type of argument that you can make in your organization to help people understand to put these policies and procedures in place. That is actually, it just makes good business sense at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, if those policies are something of interest, let us know. We can help connect you to get you the relevant information. So yeah, please reach out to us as well for that. So as you've just probably explained, for the last 10 years, there was certain limitations and information. We're in a space now where there's a lot more available. So how do we see the next 10? Can only get better, right?
Yeah, I think, and maybe you want somebody who's very strong when it comes to technology to answer the question, but certainly I can give you a couple of examples from our organization. We have what we call our ROMUs, our remotely operated mining units, in terms of our hydro mining programs. And what was a very physical, actually, when it comes to safety and security, a major concern for us role in our business. You're out on a tailings facility operating a gun 24 hours, and that's a mining gun, not a gun. You really are vulnerable. It requires a level of physicality that not all women have, certainly, is now something that we can operate from a control room. So not only is it safer from a weather point of view, it's also safer from a crime point of view. And that's just one example of where we've taken our working environment and completely revolutionized it and made it open to all genders and people from all walks of life. So I think technology is going to dramatically change our working environment. And as we know, you might not even necessarily have to be on site
Yeah.
And then obviously that's it, you know, on a mind side, but obviously things like working in a hybrid. Tonight we're having this conversation. I don't know where everybody else is, but I'm not in Johannesburg right now. So, you know, the ability to be that little bit more flexible is transforming the way in which we work, not only as women, but as everybody in the industry. So
Absolutely.
that's just a couple of examples, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Lindy, I think, you know, as a female entrepreneur as well, you're part of the change of the face of what mining looks like. You know, being strong female entrepreneur, you know, working on exploration drilling, all of those sorts of things. How do you see it? What do you see it looking like in 10 years' time? Lindy?
Are you kidding me? Oh,
I think she's frozen.
I
Okay,
am
okay, we
back.
see you. You're back, you're back.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Okay, Raksha, please repeat that.
No problem, that's
Sorry.
fine. So I was just saying that, you know, as a female entrepreneur, you're part of the change of what the face of mining looks like, right? As a woman-owned business, you know, you're playing in the male space as a service provider, you know, as a consultant into the industry. So the role of female entrepreneurs is also going to continue to change the face of mining in the future. So what does it look like from your perspective in the next 10 years?
Sure. I think it's actually looking very good. As they say, the future is female, but it's also collaborative, you know, in nature. If I can, you know, be more politically correct. But what we are seeing now more than ever, so we formed a Women in Mining business, right, to be able to bridge that gap. Firstly, saying we want to be able to say, okay, mining houses, you have a responsibility to be buying from women-owned entities, you know, or even youth as well. And you have a 30% procurement spend that you need to be making on these individuals, but you don't know where to find them. And it has been one of those situations where who are they, you know, and are they even there? Do they even exist? And that's been the biggest thing that, you know, when you approach the mining houses, that's what they say. And so we, through Women in Mining business, felt, okay, let's bridge the gap. Let's ensure that the companies that exist, that are there, that have been running, that are giving services and great service to, for that matter, very innovative businesses as well that are there, get the opportunity to actually speak to the market. Our biggest challenge as women has been that we don't have the network, you know, of the old boys club. We don't have the network of the people that are in the buying positions. And so we need to then create those opportunities where we are the ones that come forth and say, okay, this is who we are, this is what we have. And so more and more mining houses are actually opening up to that, you know, through leadership, obviously, you know, coming top down, but we also have to drive it from operational level, because unfortunately what you're finding is that as much as the procurement divisions have these big dreams and they try and implement them, the operations are still not at the same page. They don't understand the reason why we are including more and more women in our procurement. And so the conversation has to happen even at operations level. The one other thing, though, that I wanted to mention, going back to what we were talking about, is what, Fatima mentioned. We cannot keep on having the conversation amongst ourselves. Yes, we can think about what's the strategy, how do we ensure that more and more women get considered in the different roles within the mining space, how do we collaborate with our male counterparts. The conversation needs to actually happen with all of us, you know, in the room. I was at an event with the UN Women, and it was just one of those, how can I put it? It was like the elephant in the room, that we keep on saying the same thing. We keep on saying, this is what our needs are, this is what's happening. But we are having that conversation with ourselves, preaching to the converted, while we need to be having a conversation with our male counterparts, those who are in positions where they can make decisions, those who are in the position to hear and say, oh, okay, this is what needs to be done. But we need to be having these constant conversations together, because then we can drive the change, much quicker. But in the business, side of things, because there is a policy or because there is this requirement from your charter, therefore there is a look, and there is a need for the mining houses to do that. It's the right thing to do. But it's being pushed obviously by policy, by a piece of paper. And we are saying, okay, how do we then make it easier so that we can actually function within that space? But not just come because you're a woman-owned entity, but because there is a skill that you are bringing, and you are bringing a service that is actually going to improve the efficiencies, the productivity of the organization that you're going to be servicing. So we don't just come as a token, we come literally bringing what we know and our skill and what we have. So I'm not sure if I answered you, but the future is much positive, because we have something to bring to the table.
Absolutely. I think that this touches on a question that's also in the chat box from Morindeni about the fact that there are a lot of companies that are using gender and diversity as tick boxes, and it starts becoming visible sometimes, right? And this gap that exists between the decision makers and this whole gap of inclusivity. So her question is, what can we do as women to change this? And I think a lot of what you've just touched on becomes so important in the fact that we need to have more inclusive conversations with all relevant stakeholders. And I guess we need to be having a lot more honest and open conversations as opposed to dancing around the elephant that exists in the room. But that's also sometimes easier said than done, because it's very intimidating as well to have these types of conversations. Fatima, do you guys experience this? How do you guys handle that from a woman perspective?
So, Raksha, the problem is that there's so many different levels at which we have to experience this. So it's very important, as you said, and I think Claire said it as well, that you have to have buy-in from leadership. But at the different levels, there's different sort of conversations that need to be had. So, at a boardroom level, there's one conversation. Underground, there's a different conversation. There's different cultures and there's different mindsets at every level. And I think the mistake that we often make is that we want to sort of do a blanket training for everybody across the organizations. That doesn't work. It's proved not to work. And yes, one of the things, and I'm sure the ladies may agree with me, one of the things we have is that people say, in promoting women, we don't want to lose our good men. And my response to that is that if they're good men, we won't lose them if we're promoting women.
Absolutely.
If they're good men, we're not going to lose them. And it's the fear, but what about the men? And for 2023 years, nobody said, what about the women, when we were promoting men, when women were disadvantaged. So it's okay if we don't say, what about the men now? When we don't exclude the men, but we just include the women, and that we can do it,
I think we've lost Fatima. Sorry. But she had a very valid point. Lindi, do you want to pick up on what she was saying?
I think what I wanted to just add on to that is that, and it's the measurement, that's important, which is something that we also realize that we don't have a way to track how many women-owned entities get the work or get the contracts and what happens to them. Are they sustainable? So, I'll give you an example. You get a project, but let me give you a personal example. I will not mention the name of the mining house, but you get given a drilling contract. It's a 3-year contract. This is now going back to this tick box exercise. Because nobody goes back to look at whether that contract has made a material difference to your organization or not, or your business. And you've been given this 3-year contract, but it's a drilling contract of 1,500 meters, of which you need to drill 500 meters a year because it's a 3-year contract. Now, if you know anything about drilling contracts, 500 meters in 1 year means you are only working a month. For the bigger drilling machines, or whatever the type of drilling it is, that could even be the space of 2 or 3 weeks. Now, that's a contract that's been given to a woman-owned drilling company. And what happens is that the company still goes back to tick the fact that they have this, woman-owned company. So, but nobody goes back to measure, because then you have to be able to say, okay, we have this in our books. How sustainable is this project? Is it making a material difference? So that's where measurement comes in, because then once we have a look at the things that we are doing to tick the boxes, but we go back to say, okay, fine, we tick this box, but then what's the follow-up from that? Are we still existing? Do we still have women in this role or in these levels? And how are they doing? And how are they progressing? Unless we do that measurement or that checking back, we'll always end up losing the people in the system. We'll always end up having less and less women going through to the higher levels that we need them to be in, because the more of us are present in the rooms that make the decisions, the better it becomes for everybody, in the rest of the organization, whether it's with dealing with companies that are going to be giving you services that are women-owned, or even just the women who are going up through the ranks within the business itself. So you need to be able to measure that performance.
Thank you. Go for it, Thutula, sorry.
Okay. I saw Claire had her hand up,
Yeah.
and I can't find mine here. So that's why I had to pipe up and say, yeah, I think I just want to follow up on this whole measurement thing, and maybe start with the fact that, we're still on just touching 15%, and we don't seem to be moving much. So there is a lot we need to do to make sure that we're increasing the percentage of women overall in the industry. And it goes back to, again, people who just want to do a tick box. They used to have a figure of mining charter says 10%, and it's like, okay, I've got to 10%, and that's where I should stick. Hello, 50% and more of the population is women. You don't need to stop at 10% just because, you were doing a compliance thing. It's about have that mind shift. But more than anything, I wanted to talk to some of what Nakedi is raising, Lindi, which is procurement for women. And we happen as Minerals Council to be currently conducting a study on procurement, how much is going to women in terms of procurement. And I think it arises from the fact that for a long time we could not at any platform say what is happening, and everyone was wanted to hear where are women, how much of the procurement spend is on women. So I am quite pleased to say that we've got a study, and it will also include focus group discussions. So we hope the right people will be in those discussions, so that some of the things that Lindi is raising about the quality, not just it's tick, we've done it, but what is the quality of what you are doing, and how sustainable is what you are doing? Those are the things we hope, the study will be able to tease out for us.
And again, I guess it goes back to the mindset of leadership, right? Because if leadership have the right mindset to do this for the right reason, a lot of this would be eliminated as well. Claire, I know your hand is up. Go for it. Sorry, Lindi.
So actually, it's interesting that you say that, Raksha. So two things. One, I just wanted to share with Lindi that we do measure at Fraser's to what extent our procurement goes to, in South Africa, Black women-owned businesses. And at the moment, it sits at 25%. And we're actually very, very proud of that. And that's a considered effort to transfer business into the hands of women. But what we also see happening, and this is exactly the opposite of what you're saying, Raksha, is that what the conversation in the boardroom does not reach the procurement desk, right? So the boardroom might say ESG is important, and we need to make sure that organizations that are Black owned, say in the South African context, or Black female owned, are receiving our procurement, or organizations that have a small wage gap, or are paying a living wage, that we are hiring them rather than other companies. And it just doesn't happen. When you get to the procurement desk, it's all about price. So we have to make sure that our large mining houses in South Africa are taking that boardroom conversation and transferring it into their procurement desk KPIs. And right now, I can tell tell you with a lot of confidence it doesn't happen. So, I think that's absolutely key.
Yeah, that disconnect makes a huge difference then. Lindi?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm happy to hear that, because with information, when we are able to measure something, then we are able to, to make a difference, because now we know what we are dealing with. It's important for us to be able to, sorry, I lost my trail of thought there from what Claire was saying. It was actually a follow-on point, and in addition to what Claire was saying, but now I've lost it completely in my head. So I will come back when I do remember.
That's fine. That's perfect. But Fatima, sorry, we lost you for a little bit there, and I think the conversation's like shifted a little bit. But from your perspective, in terms of things such as the procurement and that disconnect that Claire's describing, what are your thoughts, and how does Sibanye deal with that?
So Sibanye is quite deliberate on measuring how we participate with our female service providers and the supply chain. So that gets measured, that gets reported on, and that gets brought up in procurement meetings, etc. Preference is always given, provided that there's no quality discrepancies. My role, however, is limited to internal, but we do have people reporting into our bi-weekly meetings on how we as Sibanye engage with women externally in our communities and our suppliers. And we do have occasions when we have our female suppliers come and display what they have and encourage more of that. So there's a deliberate drive to ensure that we have females in our supply chain.
That's great. Lindi?
Sorry, I just remembered. Yes, I just remembered. It was about the disconnect. And I think where I think it also refers to not just with procurement, but also with developing more women to go into the leadership structures of the business, is that what we need to understand is that we are obviously not coming from a level playing field, right? And there's this image where they usually put, when you're trying to create equality, one will have a much bigger platform and another will have a smaller one, and just to get everybody to be at the same place. So when we are dealing with let's say a woman-owned company, they haven't been in operation maybe as long as some of the other suppliers that we are used to working with. And that can cause a bit of a problem where we are now having companies saying, but I have a cost implication to this. So now you find that we don't understand that transformation does have a cost to it. Whether it is a time cost where we are going to take the time to mentor our women so that they get to the levels where they can sit in a boardroom, there's a cost to it. There's a time cost to it. Sometimes it's even a financial cost to it. And if we are not aware of that, or at least at the top leadership levels, or even at the operational levels of the business, we are not aware of the fact that there is a cost to empowerment, then we will always, run the risk of leaving something, undone in either one of those processes, whether it's within procurement, whether it's within developing women to go into the different leadership roles. So if the mindset can be of, okay, great, this is what we are trying to achieve. And in achieving this goal, we are possibly going to sometimes lose out on time while I'm developing this person. I had a male business partner who, in fact, he was trying to become a business partner. And he made a comment, which then made me decide, sorry, I don't think you're the right male. He says to me, oh, I've tried to mentor many, many young women, but then the minute they fall pregnant, that's it, it's over. And I'm asking myself, so does she lose her brain in the process of being pregnant? Does it mean that the process now cannot continue of you mentoring them and just adapting? I think the word adapt must be utilized in situations, especially like that, but in the cost of empowerment. That was basically what I wanted to comment on within that disconnect.
Thanks, Lindi. Yes, Fatima.
Thanks, Raksha. Just as a follow-on to Lindi's point, we do have a lot of mentoring formally and informally in the business, but what I find more effective than mentoring, or together with mentoring, is sponsorship. You need somebody with a voice to take your name. And in the absence of that, no amount of mentoring is going to, it might make a person better at their job, for sure. And it might make them eligible for a promotion, but to definitely get them promoted and get their career path trajectory escalated or speed it up, you definitely need a sponsor. And we need more males to sponsor our females. And we need them to do it and follow their journey and make sure that they get into some sort of succession planning. Because it's quite frustrating being mentored with no succession plan, with no plan for your career going forward. And unfortunately, as it stands now, we have more males that should be sponsors and a few females that can be, but males still have the louder voice in the mining industry, and we need them to step up and sponsor women if we want to see a difference.
Absolutely. So I'm going to circle back to sponsorship and mentorship, because Lindi, you mentioned something which kind of resonates to one of these questions that we have here. And I must be honest, guys, I'm a little uncomfortable with the question as well. So it's about pregnancy, and Daisy's raised a question here about how would you advise women in mining who are limited to fall pregnant the first 3 years of employment, and also signing contracts not to fall pregnant in 2 consecutive years. So is that allowed, guys? Ladies, I don't know. I mean, I'm shocked to read that this is what goes on. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm not a labor relations specialist, but that doesn't sound kosher to me. So maybe they also need to just check if the company is not overriding their rights. I mean, there are issues around being pregnant in mining, especially, in areas where there's high levels of radiation, such that a lot of companies then, if you are pregnant, will make sure you don't work underground for health reasons and while you are lactating. But I have not heard about, contracts being signed which are it just sounds very invasive for someone to be, your employer, to be telling you when to get pregnant.
I don't think that's legal, Raksha. And we have cadetship programs where we get young people on our cadetship program, and on one of our programs, 10 women out of a cohort of 40 fell pregnant. It was in their contract. we couldn't tell them, we couldn't put it in a contract of any sort. It's not allowed.
Absolutely. Claire?
So obviously it's definitely not allowed, and
yes.
It's definitely not legal. But I do know that there were some intern contracts in the industry, and it's a historic factor that people were signing contracts to say that if you take the internship, that you won't get pregnant for 2 years, and that if you are pregnant, then the contract would fall away. Now, obviously, organizations are smarter than that, and they've all pushed back and said, no, not in my name. We're not in control of whether or not you fall pregnant. And if you are in a situation like that, I would seek legal advice, because that internship is yours. You need to go out there and get it. And if for some reason one does fall pregnant, it should be paused, put on hold, and then when you are in a position to take it up again, you should be able to take it up again.
Yeah. Daisy, I hope that helps. Sorry, Claire. Yeah.
I just want to say that obviously you can't necessarily be eligible for maternity leave or paid maternity leave. So you can always take a break and then claim UIF, but you can't expect the organization that you go to work for to pay you while you're on maternity leave. But certainly you must be given an opportunity to take that break.
For sure.
Yeah.
So Daisy, please get some legal advice. I think you really need to, because this is definitely not okay in any way, and illegal more than anything else. So I think if we circle back to the sponsors and the mentors discussion, because I think that's such an important part for everyone and in everyone's journey. And I think it's something we all advocate a lot for. WiMSA obviously advocates a hell of a lot for it as well. Shanae's question is, how does one approach a sponsor? Fatima, maybe you can pick that one up for us.
Okay. So I think if you have a mentor, I think it's important to talk to them about sponsorship. It will also depend on how influential your mentor is. In Sabanya, we have Know Your Talent sessions once a month where women are identified by the Talent Council and they present to the Manco once a month of where they are, so just so that they can get familiar with the people, the people in power. And out of that discussion, usually we'll have a Manco member saying, come talk to me. I'd like to learn more about your journey and put you in touch with somebody that can help you. But in the absence of that, if you have a mentor, I would say you talk to them about sponsorship and sort of ask them to identify a sponsor in their network, because they would probably be better networked than yourself.
Okay, perfect. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Fatima. Does anybody else have any advice on sponsors as well? Because sometimes I think, obviously sponsors within your company become important, but also just industry connectors that serve as sponsors also are very important. And I think it's about trying to find and build those relationships, not only in your organization, but also within the industry as a whole. So Shanae, I hope that helps. There's another question here from Doris about how can mining companies ensure that male colleagues are supportive of inclusivity without feeling threatened by female colleagues? Who'd like to take that one, ladies? Dr. Balfour?
Okay. I think that's a great question. And it goes back to this conscientization and education, which is across the board. So when women are being introduced in an organization, then the men need to be trained and educated. And I think the one thing we also haven't talked about is unconscious bias, because, all of us have our unconscious biases, and it's things like that, where men, there's training programs for them to be able to understand what it means to have women, what are the needs of women, how to treat women as equals, and also to accept that women are equals. So a lot really has to do with training of men and them, and it's not just once off, it's constant training that needs to be put out there, which is targeted to men and also targeted to women. You are on mute.
I'm talking to myself, yeah. So it also goes back to the same thing about us, continuing to have the discussion at all levels, and including everyone as part of that as well. Lindi, do you want to share anything else on that?
Look, I mean, just a different outlook on it, as well as that. Yep. Maybe we are in the industry, we all work with other women. And there was just an observation I made in one of the projects that I was on, with how the male or female colleagues work with one another, and which is something that I felt was a danger in how then the men also view women that they work with in the space. So maybe let me just backtrack. How we treat one another as well is what teaches other people that we work with in the same space to treat us. So if I, as a female colleague, to my other female colleague, treat them a certain way or speak about them in a certain way or do certain things, to oppress or to make them look, small in the pursuit of trying to look better, it keeps us in the same place. And this is sadly some of the things that I've seen happening, in operations with female, whether you're a geologist or an engineer. And I think that that's where we as women have to teach each other and ourselves how to treat one another and how to amplify one another's profiles, if I can put it that way, instead of reducing one another, because that's what then makes other people treat women the same way that they've been treating them over the years. Because then you will have those talks where they say, oh, well, but it's the women. Yeah, but that's how they act, well, they don't like each other. And perpetuate those very statements by how we treat one another on operations or at operations. while we are being watched by other people. So some of those things that I've seen, you know, and experienced, and I thought, but this is why we still stay where we are. You know, we can't constantly keep on blaming the men when we ourselves don't know how to treat one another. Just something to add there.
Which is also an unconscious bias in a different direction, right?
It is. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Claire?
So culture. We need to make sure that we're building a psychologically safe culture for both the men and women who work in our organization. So things like rewards need to be fair. You know, gender shouldn't play a role. You've got to create an organization that has such a professional working environment that diversity can thrive. And I think that sense of feeling psychologically safe is at the heart of this. So as a man, I can openly sponsor a woman in my organization because I'm not threatened by her. I'm not threatened that she is definitely going to leapfrog me in terms of a promotion. But I can recognize what she brings to this organization, value it, and help grow her ability to help us be more innovative or sustainable in the long run. It's very, very important.
Thanks, Claire. There's another great question here from Nelly about what strategies do companies use to retain women in leadership and ensure that they succeed in those roles? Claire, maybe you can also just maybe jump on this one. I know you guys do a lot of work on that at Fraser, and it's something that you've spoken about before. And I guess it ties back into culture as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do we see? We see when we look at our exit interviews or any kind of climate survey, or, you know, we've been here for 3 months, what we call a quick check-in, we see both women and men leave organizations if they don't get promoted with the frequency that they expect, that they don't experience the right kind of career development, or that they are not fairly remunerated for the work that they do or recognized for the work that they do. So we need to make sure that all of the right policies and procedures are in place then, and that they become the lived reality of people who work in your organization. And then we need to tweak things a little bit, maybe for women, looking at our work-life balance. How are we ensuring that, and we all work in the big blur, right? Making sure that people can be masters of their own destiny, and they can decide that if they have something special and important that they need to attend to, that they can make the time to do so. And when you're making your own decisions, and obviously this is for professional people quite a lot, it is harder when you work shifts, but there needs to be flexibility in shift work too, that allows women to attend to some of their family responsibilities. So just being able to make your agenda and your diary actually suit what your requirements are. It goes a very, very long way towards retaining women. But I think that feeling of safety and security is also absolutely critical and being recognized.
Perfect, thank you. Fatima, from a Sibanye perspective, I mean, I'm sure it's probably similar, but are there other strategies that you guys employ in terms of this?
So pretty much what Claire said. Also having a clear succession plan, so women in key positions know where they can find themselves 5 years, 6 years. But as a Women in Mining project, I'm working on identifying groups of women and having regular check-ins to see where are you. Are you happy? Are you not? Are there things that we can look at to make sure that we, over and above the succession planning and the promotions, are there any of the softer issues that as a WIM lead that I need to be aware of and touch on? So that's something we hoping to start soon. I find, Raksha, that with us we completely work from home as far as we can, and there's mixed feelings. For some women, that flexibility is great. For other women, they miss the interaction. So I think all of that needs to be taken into consideration, because sometimes people don't leave because of the promotion, or they just leave because they crave more flexibility or they crave more human contact. So I think it's those softer things that we need to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, that
Chair.
makes sense. It's funny. Sometimes people want the flexibility in different directions as well. Hey, Claire, is your hand up, or is it an old hand?
Sorry, it's a very old hand, but
That's fine.
While I have the floor, maybe I'll just
Go
say
for
the
it.
other element, and it's so practical, is good maternity leave.
Yep.
You know, giving women enough time to be able to, you know, go and make sure their children are well looked after and secure, and return to work with, you know, feeling free is very, very important. And maybe just also, when we talk about culture, to say, being aware of things like the menopause policies. I don't know if you've seen, but there's this massive trend coming out of the UK at the moment to just recognize that women of a certain age, you know, we might get a little hot under the collar in the middle of a meeting at a stage. And, you know, it doesn't mean that we've lost our minds. It doesn't mean that, you know, we can no longer do our jobs. It just means that we need to fan ourselves or have a drink of water, collect our thoughts and move on. And there's no harm in an entire organization being aware of that, and making, and I think it's actually the greatest example of creating an inclusive working environment.
Inclusive, yeah.
Is for everybody to understand that and, you know, work towards it.
Absolutely, for sure. And I guess it's that understanding and inclusivity that it covers a wider net of topics these days, right? Because life is just so different as well. There's an interesting question here about AI, ladies. What are your thoughts on AI in general, and how is that going to look like to shape the future? If I go through the full question, it's do the panelists see a merging of AI within the mining industry in the near future, empowering or rendering certain roles and human operations obsolete? How can women within the industry capitalize on the emergence of AI in order to have an influence and command space within the industry? Dr. Balfour, what are you guys looking at from an AI perspective?
Well, AI is everyone's business because it's here and it will be here to stay. In my field, actually, there's quite a lot of work being done, which is AI related. For instance, there's everyone in mining has an X-ray, you know, done. And we have found, in fact, the Minerals Council has been supporting, you know, one of the DOH entities dealing with occupational lung diseases, where they have been piloting AI to read X-rays. And therefore it means, you know, the ordinary or the normal X-ray, AI can read that for you. And they also found that TB can also be fairly well recognized by AI, which means that instead of, you know, you have a doctor looking at too many X-rays, some can be, you know, read by AI, and then the ones where they flag something, or AI flags something, those are the ones that people concentrate on. So there's a lot of jobs, you know, which are repetitive, and I don't think we should view AI as taking away jobs. It means that some of the repetitive work you can remove so that you are even better able now to focus on other things and to expand and deliver better services. So it is definitely there. And we are very welcoming, you know, of AI, and it's something that we should embrace and see how, you know, it improves our jobs, so that we then channel our brains to be doing something else.
Absolutely. Lindi? Yeah, go for it.
I think as an entrepreneur, it's exciting. It's exciting because it creates now a space for entry, you know, an opportunity for entry. Innovation, I think, is key in any, you know, reinvention, whether of your career or whether of your life, or as a person, whether you're going through a time where you need to pivot or, you know, come in afresh. So I think the introduction now of AI and certain technologies is definitely going to be opening up the playing field even more. You know, I think that to be able to enter the space, one needs to be able to do your research and see where you can actually find a niche, because the value chain is so huge, and there's so many places there where technology can play a role in improving efficiencies, or even improving on our current operations and how we do things, being that change. So I think as an entrepreneur, I would encourage people, to actually go out there and look at what's happening along the mine's value chain and where those gaps are, where technology can actually be utilized, because innovation is something that everybody is looking at, especially if you're looking at it from the perspective of improving how we mine, with a mindset of the environmental, social, and governance impact of it. So ESG being the biggest thing that is on our minds right now, technology has the potential to fast track how we even look at our world and improve our mining. So yeah, that's what I would basically encourage on that, on taking advantage.
I mean, it's incredibly exciting, but it's also kind of terrifying all in one. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it rolls out in the future, for sure. I don't think there's any other questions. Claire, thank you. I see you've answered Pauline on the gender pay gap issue. It's already 10:02, so I don't want to keep anyone a lot longer either. So maybe we can just round up with some closing thoughts. Our discussion tonight was about what it means to be a woman in mining in South Africa, and I think it excites me so much every time I listen to any of you about the passion that you have and this continuous drive to want to create a better world, for everyone in a mining context, and how we can all come together to share our insights and our thoughts to create a better country ultimately, for us all to thrive in. So as closing statements or comments as well, from you guys, in terms of, what are some of the things that, we as women in mining should focus on, or how should we come together to do more, perhaps, such that we can create a very sustainable environment for us all to grow and to succeed in. Claire, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, and thanks, Raksha. And I said earlier, it's a fascinating time to be in mining. There's this dynamic shift, and our ESG impact is so strong, and I'm excited to be a part of that. And we've spoken a lot tonight about the role of professional women in mining and what some of the professional women's challenges are, and about finding sponsors and mentors and coaches, which is great. But I just want to maybe pause for a second and remember that sometimes a lot of the constraints to having more women in mining are societal. And we are doing some really good work against gender-based violence with the Minerals Council members. And I think there's a beautiful way in which different mining companies can come together. We are supporting a number of Thutula care centres, which are homes that individuals who are victims of gender-based violence, women and people from the LGBTQI+ community can go into. They are run by the NPA, so there's no need to go to a police station if somebody, if you want to do a rape kit or report the crime that has occurred. And through partnership and collaboration, we can build more and more of the Thutula care centres. And you don't have to sponsor one by yourself. You can refurb one or find a number of different partners. And so I think it is just you said, how do we collaborate? And I think this is a great way that we can collaborate and just have an impact on the ground in order to create a better sort of environment for women to thrive in, and then be able to take on some of these amazing opportunities that do exist in our communities, in our mining communities, like, making themselves available for work opportunities and bursaries, etc., etc.
Yeah, you guys are doing some great work with that as well. And I think, GBV is a whole other conversation. And I think we've touched on so many things here, but we've probably only just scratched on the surface with a lot of these topics. And we could probably talk, forever on a lot of these things. But thank you, Claire, that's very helpful and insightful as well. And I think, just as a point on GBV, WiMSA is going to run a campaign later in the year from a GBV focus when we look at the 16 days of activism. And, we'll definitely reach out as well, so you guys can share some of your thoughts with that as well. And I think it's a big topic that a lot of people need to talk about a lot more as well. And we as a community need to afford the spaces for people to be comfortable to share. And how can we get together to actually help make the difference from that perspective? Because it's probably one of the main reasons why a lot of people leave the industry as well. And we've got to recognize that for what that is. Lindi, what about your side? Any closing thoughts and how are you going to continue to fuel the passion, and what do we need to do?
Yeah, I think for me, it's taking those risks. What I wanted to actually just say, you know, to the ladies is that we need more women who actually own the mining companies themselves. You know, we need you to show us how it's done. There are so many professionals, you know, especially even on this platform, who know there's mining engineers, there's geologists, you know, so let's not be afraid to explore, because a lot of the explorers are still male, you know, and that's why you're still going to end up having more and more, you know, mining houses being owned by just men. But we need to be able to also take that risk. And I'm trying to inspire, you know, some of the women who are on here who actually have the capabilities, you know, but that's basically what I, you know, wanted to say, is that let's take more risks. There's so much that we can still be able to bring to the table, especially if we are willing to take risks, especially if we are willing to be leaders. If we're going to be leading ourselves, we can also lead the industry and be leading within the different spheres or sectors that we are in. That was, you know, the one thing that I wanted us to just, let's take the risk. That business opportunity or that idea that you have, take risk.
And if we all didn't take risks, we wouldn't be here today either, right? So it's taking those risks now as we move forward to the next generation and the next chapter of this. Fatima, from your perspective, your thoughts?
Raksha, I think if we want to create a pipeline of the girl child that gets interested in the STEM STEM subjects and then later mining, we can't focus on them when they get to high school. We need to focus on them when they're still in primary school, because by the time they get to high school, they are already so burdened with responsibilities in their, you know, by 13, they've already known that they need to cook and clean. So when they get to high school, they choose the easier subjects. If we are able to take them out of that environment when they high performance at a young age, put them into different schools, get them encouraged so that when they come to 16, 17, 18, they choose subjects in the STEM. Usually by the time they have to choose their subjects in grade 10, they choose the easy subjects because their responsibilities are so much. If we can provide better environments for them to learn and succeed for the high performance at the ages of 10, 11, 12, we'll probably, you know, within the next 20 years, change the face of the STEM sort of industries.
Definitely. And I think, you know, a lot of the work that we all need to do needs to definitely go beyond that, right? So Claire, I think we need to start a primary school career fair next time, because we need to target it at those levels. It's so crucial. Fatima, 100%. Thank you. Dr. Balfour?
First of all, I think I concur with Claire that, you know, they say it's when people are few, they're a major minority, then it's very difficult to shift things. I think we are getting to the levels where we are going to stop being a big minority, and then we see the, you know, things picking up as women, you know, in mining. For us in the Minerals Council in particular, I think we need to concentrate more on measurement, you know, monitoring that there is progress, and because, you know, what you can't manage that which you can't measure. And that's why even the dashboard that we have got a dashboard for our members where they report on a number of metrics. And I think we just need to make sure that we refine all of that to make sure we are measuring the right things, which are, you know, which have an impact. And with that, it means we'll be able to see if in 5 years we are making progress or not. And I think the other one is on collaboration. There are still, you know, if you are a minority of 15%, you really need everyone. We can't be working in our own little corners. We must cross-pollinate each other, and we must leverage off each other. Then we will, you know, really catalyze, you know, our impact. So collaboration, certainly we need to improve on that if we are to make a big difference, you know, in taking women forward in the industry.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Balfour. And I think that is one of the big conclusions from everything that we all talk about is we all have the same passion, we all have the same drive, we all are looking to make the same impact in society and in this industry. So the more of us that come together, the more powerful we are in terms of how we make those changes as well. Ladies, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I think this was such a fruitful conversation, and there's so much that we spoke about, and there's so much more that we can definitely talk about. To all of our members who joined us tonight as well, thank you very much for your time. And if there are specific topics and specific conversations that you'd like us to talk more about, please let us know at WiMSA so we can start facilitating those sorts of discussions. I think we need to continue with the conversations in order for us to make the big impacts we're looking for. And from a collaborative perspective, the Minerals Council, like Dr. Balfour has shared, has got so much of information out there. So have a look at what's there. WiMSA exists as as a place of contact and support, and reach out to us if you need it, as well as to all the female entrepreneurs that are out here. WiMBiz is also around. Look out for their websites, and let's look at how we can all come together and make this difference that we're working so hard for. Thank you so much, guys. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much to everyone for joining, and we'll see you guys soon. And happy Women's Month.
Yeah.